Hey, everybody, and welcome to my review of Superman Action Comics number 1021, written by Brian Michael Bendis and art by John Romita Jr. And this is a very convoluted issue. It's also an issue with horrendous art. And if you're a John Romita Jr. fan, you can argue with me in the comments, but I will show a panel as we go that will pretty much prove my point that his days of great art are long behind him. Brian Michael Bendis ends up telling a convoluted story that ends up twisting and turning in its own continuity. It ends up being more about pushing Leviathan than being a Superman book. You end up having on the cover Young Justice, which you barely see. And if you were wanting to get some answers of, say, why Connor is in our universe and what he's doing, you're not going to get it here, which I didn't think we would, but it kind of hints that you would, but we don't. Also, I just want to say, whoever put in Entertainment Weekly and said this is the superhero of the year in this book, they got something loose, some screws loose in their head. This book is terrible. You end up with a before, where you have Alex there. Hey, everybody, look at Metropolis down there. It looks pretty crazy. Oh, man, we're going to go and do some damage. And you end up having Grodd, Sinestro, Leviathan, Red Cloud, and a Brainiac and Cheetah over there on the side, all looking there and like, all right, let's go. Let's take care of that Justice League. And again, if you're going to set a timeline, I need more than a before and a now, because the before and the now is never explained. It never seems to work out. And we'll get to the timeline by the end of this. Pretty much the stories that end up, that Brian Michael Bendis is trying to tie into, they've lapped him by now. His pacing is so glacial that the other stories have now gone and done and finished and moved on, and he's still stuck back in the deal, including one that's his own story. But you end up in this whole deal. You have Leviathan Island there hovering above Metropolis. You end up having the Legion of Doom kind of picking up the pieces of what the Justice League is to go get Superman and talk a lot of trash on him and tell him that he's nonsense and they have taken over. And you do get Red Cloud, the villain that, I don't know, not many people care about or like, again, going to be the one to put the major damage on Superman, because it's a Brian Michael Bendis character, and we have had them fight before. We have had Red Cloud almost kill Superman, but not in this. Well, back to that is, and there's a lot of rinse and repeat in this. You end up having her choking out Superman, and it looks like she is going to be able to do that, and Lex will be able to laugh while that's happening. But an aside, here is the panel to tell you, there's Grodd. And I'm trying to convince you that that's Grodd, because I'll have to convince you that's awful. And that's not even the worst of this, but Grodd people. But yeah, you end up having Lex, he's monologuing about how great he is and how he has to get rid of the nonsense of Superman so that he can get the planet Earth ready so that him and his Justice, or the Legion of Doom, forgive me, can ascend and become the leaders. Now, as this is going on, this is dealing with things that Scott Snyder was dealing with in his Justice League books months and months and months ago. We have gone so past this. And in fact, what Lex is saying seems goofy, because we've even then had Hell Arisen that happened after the whole Scott Snyder deal. That's already over, and we see what happened to Lex. I won't spoil it, but he's a little off on what he thinks the plan is going to end up being. Again, though, the stuff that Brian Michael Bendis is dealing with is stuff that Scott Snyder was dealing with in October and November. It isn't even at the end of his run. You still end up having the Legion of Doom involved, and they end up in the Justice League run being turned into furniture way, way back. So having them there and doing all this, it's getting to the point where it's a joke how bunch of stories, how there's nothing going on. And even in this issue, it's just a lot of yakety yak. It's a lot of, look at me, I'm better. No, I'm better. No, I'm better. You end up having Red Cloud choking out Superman, as we said. And Connor ends up getting upset. He comes in to attack Lex, and he ends up doing okay at first, but he's overcome by Lex, Brainiac, and Sinestro that then end up being able to knock him down. They weren't counting on another Superboy being there, so that was okay, but they end up kind of getting down, and that's where you have Batman and everybody else jump in, and the fight is on again. In the meantime, you do have Superman. He's getting choked out, and the only thing he can think to do is to plead with Red Cloud to have a conscience, and says, please save the boy there. He's special, but also there's a bus with kids down the street. They're trapped. They're on fire. There's a kid there. Can you kind of help? I mean, they're in trouble. And yes, Red Cloud decides, oh, I can't just choke out Superman here when there's a bus of kids, and does go off and save the bus full of kids while you have the Justice League and the Legion of Doom fight it out. Well, when Red Cloud then finishes saving kids and comes back, suddenly now, she's on the side of good. She ends up behind the Justice League. Hey, I'm going to be on your team. You end up having Grodd, who is the guy who's trash talking a lot to Luthor, probably because he looks like nonsense, says, oh, your secret weapon, it's on their side now. And Lex is not worried. In the meantime, Brainiac is seemingly getting attacked by Red Cloud. He looks like he is on fire, and he's doing the stop, drop, and roll, and looks kind of silly, while the rest of them don't even look to see what's going on. Something seems weird with that, but Lex is basically like, there's no worries here. Hey, Lex, he'll say it's all a plan, because Leviathan is still on their side, and he yells to Leviathan now, and Leviathan does what he was going to do, but he doesn't do what Lex thought he was going to do. He ends up teleporting the Legion of Doom away, not the Justice League. And then pretty much comes down to say, hey there, Justice League, I'm kind of on your team, but you went about it the wrong way. You're throwing buildings. I didn't do anything like that. I was able to change the world without doing one thing. Kind of forgets about making tons of buildings disappear, kidnapping people, maybe brainwashing them. So it's not as clear cut there, Leviathan, but it continues the whole idea of Brian Michael Bendis using super books, Action Comics, and Superman to push other characters, specifically Leviathan, and to try to convince us that Leviathan is a big bad that should be, respected and loved. I don't know anybody who likes Leviathan. And every time you see Leviathan, he gets more and more ridiculous. Again, it's Mark Shaw, Manhunter, who is Leviathan. Nobody cares about Mark Shaw. That was just thrown out of nowhere. I think Brian Michael Bendis thought maybe it was going to be a big deal. Nobody cared. So you end up having Leviathan, and you end up in this issue having him talk with a little bit of jokey dialogue. And again, it comes off weird. He does end up having a different voice every time he shows up. And Brian Michael Bendis is the only one writing him. But he's there and he's like, I'm so sick of rich bald lunatics telling me what to do. And then at one point says, Batman surmised they're using multiple wild interdimensional power sources that are so dangerous. It's just nonsense. And then says, not to gossip, that Brainiac is a walking disaster waiting to happen, right? Yeah, so it's nonsense. And is explaining, I ended up sending the Legion of Doom away. I didn't kill him. I sent him away as far as I could, but I didn't want to kill him on this plane because that would cause a lot of problems. And then goes, again, Brian Michael Bendis a lot of times goes a little too far, because then he says, one of my contemporaries who specializes in Luthor level crazy. Now, I think that Brian Michael Bendis wants us to be like, oh my God, who's that? Oh, that's so cool. I don't care. Says he pointed out that he probably has multiple plans of, terror ready in the event of his death. Meaning if Lex dies, he probably has multiple plans of terror. The thing is, he's already died. That's how he became Apex Lex half a year ago. I know that he means continuing on, but I don't think that Brian Michael Bendis knows what happened with Lex, what was going on in the Justice League that led up to this story. Because there's been times where even the last issue where you have Lex say, if anybody destroys one of my buildings, you don't have any buildings anymore, Lex. You blew up one yourself that killed you, but also you liquidated all of everything. You don't have LexCorp anymore. And Brian Michael Bendis continues to not realize that and continues to play this just like a schmuck who could care less about what anybody else is writing. He makes his own little universe, a pocket universe that I wish somebody would put in their pocket and walk the hell away from me and get very far away because I can't stand it. But you end up then where Leviathan says, hey, smell you later. And he does a lot of posing and stuff to the people of Metropolis. Now, as I see Metropolis in the up top there, not a lot of people are out on the streets. They're social distancing themselves right there because the crap has hit the fan. But you end up with the Young Justice and the Justice League then saying, oh, we got to clean up. Let's clean up, everyone. All right. Yeah, this is fun, right? Oh, my. And then you get a cliffhanger. You end with Red Cloud going over to Leone and saying, hey, I almost killed Superman. And I look Lex in the eye. Boy, he's a nut. And you end up where, okay, we had a progression of Robinson Good, Red Cloud, that I actually liked. I actually liked her going and helping out the Justice League. Now, Brian Michael Bendis is going to play this deal of now I got their trust and things. Well, not really. A Batman is not going to trust Red Cloud just because she goes off to save a bus and then comes and stands behind them. And really, after that, did not do anything else to prove herself or do anything. So this is not going to trick anybody in the Justice League. But I liked seeing Robinson Good actually go on the side of good and maybe do a little bit more because as a villain, I think she is complete nonsense. As a villain, I think Leone is complete nonsense and most a bore. You're boring is what it is. But she says then, so that we know a time frame, hey, Red Cloud, Superman, I got word tomorrow he's going to reveal his identity. I'm like, really? Can you keep these books up to date with your other stories? I know that this is not that long ago, but the whole idea where everybody's been trying to figure out a timeline in this book, and you are throwing things now where once you start to get specific, you realize, well, that doesn't make sense of where the Justice League book was with the league. There are a lot of key things that Brian Michael Bendis is now melding together that don't make sense, but says, hey, Superman's going to reveal his identity tomorrow. And if we get together, boy, we could own everything. I'm like, this is just back to what we were doing 8 months ago. This is nothing different. You were kind of on the same team before. Now the only switcheroo is that somehow earlier the Lex announces that the gangs of Metropolis are all down with Red Cloud. Well, Leone was, and it's nonsense. And it's not anything that's interesting. It's a convoluted mess. This art is awful. All of these things are just bad. And to lead with or end with a cliffhanger of, hey, the big bads are going to be Leone and Robinson Good Red Cloud. Well, this is why the book isn't selling, because nothing's interesting. Nothing is going on. Nothing makes sense. You have awful art. And I do think that Brian Michael Bendis really thought that bringing John Romita Jr. on this book was going to increase sales. There's no way. There is no way that that's happening. And this book is in danger of going down into the 20s, into the 20,000. That is pathetic. There is no way, no how that Action Comics should ever be a book that sells in the 20,000s. And now we have all this Corona stuff going on. So when everything comes back, who knows what's going to go on? But when everything comes back, you need stories to hit. And you need stories to be something that you want to read. Brian Michael Bendis at a point, I would have said, hey, he's better in trade because of the time he takes or whatever. I'm not buying a trade of this crap. It's terrible. Because of that, I ended up, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10 here. And the 3 is mostly art, which I didn't like. So there you go. I mean, this is the lowest score that I've done on any of these videos. And I don't like to get that riled up and yell or whatever, but that seems what people like on YouTube anyway. But, hey, I don't want to play that game, but I can't help it. You start going through this and it's infuriating. It's infuriating that he ends up doing both Action Comics and Superman because we don't have an alternative. If you are a Superman fan, you're stuck with Brian Michael Bendis, or you just don't read Superman right now. And to tell people, hey, you're a Superman fan, well, too bad. You're going to have to come back later, next year, a year from there. Please, that's not the deal. Then you can't even say, well, you could go read Legion of Superheroes because Superboy, oh, I forgot Bendis is writing that. Oh, well, you have Connor. Oh, my, that's Young Justice and Bendis is writing that. He is trying to corner the market, and the only market he's cornering is the market of awful writing and terrible books with awful pacing and just nonsense. But there you go. I got to calm down. I'm going to go take my blood pressure medicine after this. But that is it. I hope that you enjoyed the review more than I enjoyed the issue. But if you did, it'd be great if you subscribe to the channel, end up liking the video. You can complain or argue with me if you don't agree with me down below, or if you do agree, we can talk about it in the comments section below. And also look at the description of this and every other video that has links to everything Weird Science, including links to our podcast, Marvel and DC, and sites Marvel and DC, and other things like our Patreon account that end up, if you go there, you can support us for these videos and everything else we do, but also get a ton more shows. But thank you all, and I'll talk to you later.